this on? There we go. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am glad that you're here. I'm thankful that you choose to spend time here. For those of you who are new, or those of you that have been bouncing in and out, we are in Hebrews. We've been in the book of Hebrews since the beginning of May, and we will be in the book of Hebrews till the the second to last week of this month. We've got a few more weekends of what we'll do, but what we've been doing in Hebrews is we've been spending time in this book, just going through the book, and we're going to continue to go through the book. But the idea, or I guess the illustration that we're using, or the analogy that we're using inside of what we're doing, of how we are grabbing this information and how we're preparing for God to speak into our lives, is we're looking at ourselves through the lens of brewing coffee and the brewing process of how you would brew coffee. We talked about we talked about at the beginning of last month how coffee, while it starts with the coffee bean, there are all sorts of types of coffee. There are all sorts of regions that coffee is grown in. There are different types of roasts of coffee. There are also different types of ways to grind coffee, to get a coffee ground. There are also many different ways to brew coffee. And we've talked about how the reality of people is that we're all different. Look across the room. We all look different. We all sound different. And as you stare up here on stage, I think a lot of you realize that there are some people that act different than you. And so the idea, right, is that we're not the same. And so if we're not the same, things aren't going to be always exactly identical in our life. But what can happen, even though we're not the same, is that we can all be made, metaphorically, right, into coffee. We can all be the coffee bean. We can all go through the grinding process, because in the grinding process, which is how deep this gets, you can be ground to a specific coarseness. You can be bigger chunks, or you can be fine dust. It's not one or the other. It's anywhere in between. You grind due to how you're going to brew the coffee. The grinding specific, if you do not grind the coffee bean the right way and you do not brew with the correct coffee grounds, you are not going to get the intended cup of coffee. We talked about weeks ago how, now I'm going to speak only from my experience, but my experience of going out of our country and talking with people who have been out of our country, we seemingly are the only country that tends to have this people group when it comes to coffee. I like my coffee strong, a.k.a. I like my coffee bitter, a.k.a. that's not strong coffee. Strength of coffee is caffeine related. It's not taste related. Taste comes from the type of coffee bean, the origin in which it was grown, and the roast in which it was roasted. That's where the taste comes from. Nah. Yes. The bitterness in your coffee is gas. Gas that is released from the ground up coffee bean as soon as the water touches it. As soon as the water saturates it, it starts to do what we're going to look at a little bit today, is bloom. It grows. It grows due to the release of the gas from the coffee bean. When you do that properly, when you do that correctly, you will not get coffee that has separation on it. You will not have oil circles in your coffee. You will have coffee the way it's intended. And when you drink coffee the way it's intended, and then you have it any other way, it's less than. It's less than. It's the same way with us. If you as a Christian, look at me, right? If I as a Christian do not allow the blooming process to take place, right? If I don't allow, when God touches me, to saturate my life, if I don't allow the things that need to escape, that are being forced out, listen to this. Gas doesn't just choose to leave the coffee bean. It is a scientific byproduct of what happens once the water saturates the coffee bean. It has to release. It has to go somewhere. When Jesus Christ touches your life, things have to go somewhere. We choose in our impatience to brew incorrectly, which allows us then to tolerate or forces us to tolerate and accept this bitter coffee. And so, to prove that I am worth drinking this subpar product, I'm going to fly the flag of me being a strong person. I like strong coffee. No, you've settled into something subpar. You've settled for something that's less than. And we're going to push this envelope and push this analogy as we jump into chapter 7 of Hebrews. We have worked through Hebrews. The first 3 chapters, we worked through the identity of who Jesus is. Jesus is this person. He is the author of everything. He is the power in which God the Father created all things with, and He is the power in which God the Father sustains all things through. He's the heir of everything. He is better than all. We talked about how Jesus' identity makes Him better, but not only His identity makes Him better, but what He does makes Him better. He is a better sacrifice than any sacrifice. He's a better priest than any high priest. He's a better leader than Abraham and Moses. Jesus is better than. We've been spending time then talking through how we are met with this truth. And so now what is required of us is we have to go through a grinding process. We have to accept that what we are in this analogy or in this illustration is we are a coffee bean, and to become what is intended from us, the coffee bean mixing with the water, Jesus Christ, becoming one, the coffee, the intended thing. The intended purpose, the intended goal. For us to do that, we have to have our coffee bean ground up. We have to change. We have to be crushed. We have to mature. We have to be willing to go through that process in which that changes us. Amen? So here we are. We are a pile of ground up coffee beans. And today we're going to be placed in the filter, and today we're going to watch as Jesus runs His water, Himself, the living water over us. So we're going to look at something that we have to let go and what it means for our lives. We have not 3 books. Let me slow down. We have 3 chapters to get through today. There's a specific spot, specifically in chapter 7, that I am not going to spend a lot of time on because we would be here the whole day. 2, I'm not always settled in what some of this talks about. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to point it out to you, and you're going to just be challenged to do some self-reflective leadership or research yourself, but also know that that's not the intention of what we're talking about. This will make sense here in a little bit. But we're going to be in chapters 7, 8, and 9. So if you're ready, you can jump into chapter 7. I'm going to pray so that God will shut me up and speak through me, and then we're going to dive in. If you wouldn't mind, God, thank you so much for who you are. I'm thankful for this opportunity. I'm thankful for these people that listen. God, I pray that you completely tune me out, shut me up, so that you deliver to myself included and all of us here that are listening, Father, but you deliver the message that you want us to receive. You deliver the message that you want us to hear. And so, God, as we look at how you saturate us today, I pray, Father, that you will allow us to know what it is we are to let go. And then you give us the power and the strength to do that. Father, I love you. We love you. All God's people said, amen. So like I said, chapter 7 is where we're going to be at, or where we're going to start in today. In this letter, if you've been following along, Jesus, or we've read this phrase, Jesus is a priest in the order after Melchizedek. And it was something that we read at the end of last week, or towards the end of last week when we were together, and it's something that we're going to read a little bit about here. And this is what I'm not going to dive into a lot. I'm not going to dive into who Melchizedek is. I'm not going to dive into that relationship. There's something specific I want to point out about the relationship that Jesus and Melchizedek have, but outside of that, I'm not spending much time there. And so I know that some of you might be disappointed, and I'm sorry, that's not the point of today. Today is very specific. Hebrews, it would take us an entire year or more to go through all of the things that we needed to go through at Hebrews. So if you want to find out stuff about Melchizedek and you would like to know more things, Google is phenomenal. Also, what I've enjoyed playing with, ChatGPT. It's fantastic to gather information. And so if you want to do research, and we'll have conversations. But as we read through it, no, I'm intentionally skipping over and I'm not talking about certain things, and we will not spend much time there. But moving into chapter 7, we're dealing with this idea of this priest, Melchizedek. And it talks about how he was a king from Salem, and those of you that are, if you are, Old Testament scholars, and you like the history of Israel and the Old Testament history of what happened throughout God's people from start to finish, from start until Jesus, you read about this king, and you read about this king inside of Abraham. Now, after there was a battle, after there was a war won and spoils were given, this priest comes into the picture. This is verse 2. And it says, and to him, this is Melchizedek, Abraham apportioned a 10th part of everything. He is first by translation of his name, king of righteousness, and then he is also king of Salem, that is, king of peace. Verse 3, he is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. Now remember, this letter that we're reading was written to a group of individuals that the writer is already assuming knows all about the Israeli history. The history of God's people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all of it. He's speaking to people that know this with zero hesitation and shadow of a doubt of what the information was. And so sometimes in reading Hebrews, there's the assumption that you just agree. That you just agree that this is how it is because this is how it is. And so I guess just in the vein as you read, as you try to grow, sometimes I think what we struggle with, sometimes I think what I struggle with in letting go in this process as I allow God to pour his living water over me, right? When the water saturates my coffee grounds first, sometimes what I got to let go of is some presuppositions that I bring in when I read in my Bible. Some things what I got to let go of is the ability to understand completely what I'm reading. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I don't know that I agree with the assumption, but what I do understand is that it takes faith. Faith in believing what you don't see. And so I don't know if that's you, but sometimes in your reading Scripture, you may just need to let go that you're not going to understand it completely yet. We read last week, right? God's word is alive, it's active, it's sharper than any two-edged sword. Trust, if you don't understand now and you keep reading, when you read it again at a later date, as you've grown, you will understand more. But he says, right, this is who Melchizedek was. No genealogy, no mother or father, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. He goes on to talk about Abraham, and he goes on to talk about Levi, and he talks about how those priests are who we were set up, the Israelite people who they were set up to offer sacrifices through. And he says this in verse 8. Right? Yeah, verse 8. In one case, tithes are received by mortal men, which are the Levites, the priestly line, the Levitical line that was in the people of Israel. By one way, he says, tithes were received by mortal men, but in the other case, by one of whom it is testified that he lives. Verse 9, before we get to verse 9, in one way it was given to mortal men, and in another way it was given to one, it says, who testifies that he lives. There is no beginning, there is no end, it's just that he lives. The writer's making a point that there's a difference between Aaron and the Levitical line of priests that were descendants from Abraham and Melchizedek and Jesus. There's a priestly line here that was specifically given by God through a family that everyone in Israel pays pays. You give offering, you make sacrifice, and the priests are who do it, the priestly line, the Levitical line. But then you have Melchizedek and you have Jesus, completely separate. Two different things. Two different ways. Verse 9. One might even say that Levi himself, who received tithes, paid tithes through Abraham. Verse 10, for he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. The writer's trying to make a very clear picture that there are two distinct priestly lines that are being communicated, that are being talked about. There are two distinctly different lines when it comes to offering sacrifice for the people. And there's two different purposes for them. As you read through the rest of 7, you get to see some of those differences. You get to read places in Scripture that God prophesied that Jesus Christ was going to be in the line of a priesthood like Melchizedek. The idea being that he's a priest that lives. There's no end, there's no beginning, there's no genealogy, which there is in Jesus, but the idea is that he's in a line of priests. I guess I'm over here if I'm using the right example on the right side. He's in a line of priests that live, that are here. Not the Levitical line of priests that stem from Aaron, that are here. It says in verse 26, as it goes through the differences, right, it says this in verse 26. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners and exalted above the heavens. Verse 27. He has no need, like those high priests of old, to offer sacrifices daily. Aaron, Levi, those priests in the Levitical line, they had to offer sacrifices daily for the sins of the people as well as the sins of themselves. And then only once a year, one person, the high priest, was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies, the presence of God, to offer sacrifice for himself because of the sins that he did, as well as the sins of the people and all that they have done. Every day sacrifices were given. Every single day sacrifices were given for the people and for the priests. Verse 27, right? It says, first, for his own sins. He has no need, like the priest of old, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins, and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. He's speaking about Jesus. Jesus didn't sacrifice lambs, goats, birds. He didn't give grain offering and drink offering. Jesus gave his life. Verse 28, for the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, the law, the Levitical line, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. I only want to spend time, and I know it's confusing, and I don't know where you're at in your mind, but we can agree and move on that this is true. There are two different ways. The writer of Hebrews is talking about two different ways. The ways of the mortal men, the priestly line of Aaron and Levi, as well as this line, immortal, the line that has been chosen by oath, the line that lasts forever, the line that doesn't offer sacrifice daily for themselves and for others, the line that offers sacrifice of himself for others. Two different ways. The writer keeps this thought process because I think we understand this in life. This is stepping out of the Bible right now of what we're talking about, but I think we understand this. There's always an answer to the question. But is that the best answer? Is that the most efficient answer? Is that the answer that actually fits? Or is it just an answer, right? Sometimes it's this, well, I got it done. It's not the most efficient way. It wasn't the best way. It wasn't even the choice of way I would have chosen, but I got it done. We've heard this, where there's a will, there's a way. We understand the truth that there are all sorts of types of ways to do things. What I think sometimes we struggle with is that while there are multiple ways to get something done, there is a more efficient way than others. There is a better way than others. Not in every circumstance, not in every situation, but I think that that is a truth that applies. That sometimes it takes us as individuals to go, is this the best answer, the best way, or is this just a way? Is this Levitical line the best way? Or is it just a way? Because then this line over here, the line that we read is an order after Melchizedek, right? The line that Jesus Christ is in. There's multiple ways, but there might be a better way. There's multiple ways to brew your coffee. There's the intended way, and it might just be a better way simply because it produces the intended product. This Levitical line didn't produce the intended product. This line after Melchizedek, right? This is a line that Jesus Christ is in, seemingly checked all the boxes and more. The writer, though, he keeps going into chapter 8, and he talks about how Jesus is a better priest of a better covenant. And so while we're different priests, right, now we're going to start talking about how there's different covenants. A covenant that was made with Abraham, and now a covenant that was made with Jesus. What do I got? If you read the first few verses, it starts, it continues on the conversation of how we're going to call this the earthly things, and then we're going to call this the heavenly things. So the priestly line of Aaron and Levi are the earthly things, and the priestly line of Jesus and Melchizedek, right, that's the heavenly things. It talks about these earthly things and how these earthly things work. But it says in verse 6 of chapter 8, "But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is much more excellent than the old, as the covenant he mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises." The covenant of old is the covenant of the Old Testament. It is the law, it is the scriptures, it is what you read inside of the Gospels that Jesus fulfilled upon his birth, upon his life, upon going to the cross and sacrificing himself. He fulfilled the old covenant. The old covenant was, be holy as I am holy. Be different, be set apart. And we fail. And when we fail, that's why priests have to sacrifice for us daily. Because we fail. And the blood of goats and the blood of lambs and the blood of birds and the drink offering and the smoke offering and the burnt offering and all of these offerings and sacrifices, they were very temporary. And so this had to be on a cycle. It had to keep going. But it says that Jesus grabbed a ministry that's much more excellent than this. Because he mediates a better covenant, a better promise than the one that was over here. If you read, so again, look at the two different things. There's two different ways. One way gets it done, but it's on this constant repetition, and in truth, it just constantly falls short, and it's just not really exactly what it was intended, unless you look at it and go, it was what it was intended for, and we'll get there in a minute. But then this, as it seems that Jesus paid the price once for all, and instead of going into the Holy of Holies that's covered by curtains, and it's created to resemble a throne or a place, a seat that God's presence can be, Jesus goes right into the actual presence of God and stands there. So it's a better ministry than what was before. It's not just the shadow and copies of things, it's the actual things. Verse 13 in chapter 8, you can read through after verse 6. If you read verse 8 of chapter 8 all the way through, you read a little chunk from Jeremiah. But if you pick up in verse 13, it says, "In speaking of a new covenant, he makes the old one obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away." The writer of Hebrews was saying there's difference, right? There's two different things. There's two different ways. Here, he's making it very clear that Jesus Christ ended the old covenant. It's over with. It's done. If you keep reading, you read about a will, and you read in chapter 9 about a will and how a will takes into effect. A will is not in effect until the person who created it is now dead. Jesus had to die for the new covenant to take effect. He had to die to fulfill the old way. There are two ways, but the writer of Hebrews is pointing out that there's a better way. There's an intended way, a way that actually gets what the goal and what the purpose was. I want to read just a few things in chapter 9. 7, 8, 9, there's a lot, and it's sort of the same thought process and the same conversation as you read through them. And so, again, as we're clipping through this, I'm trying to make it clear that the writer of Hebrews is talking to a people who understood one way, and they were struggling with this one way that they were raised on, that they were taught, that made sense, that actually blessed them. They're struggling that it was gone, it was over with, and there was this new way. This new way that then allowed them to do the exact same things, but even more. It allowed them to do the exact same things, but greater than. And so as the writer's talking through this idea that, listen, what we dealt with prior were copies of the heavenly things, and what we're dealing with now are the actual heavenly things. When we were under the old covenant, they were just copies. They were to resemble, but Jesus is the sacrifice in the new covenant that literally stands in the presence of God, not interceding and making sacrifice for his own sins, but he has been perfect, so he doesn't have to worry about any of that. He only makes sacrifices for us. And the reason that God allows him to stand there is because he was perfect in his own life. And the reason he allows him to speak for us and over us and cover us in our sin is because he lived a perfect life. The writer of Hebrews continues to try to allow these people, or to connect these people to understand that even though there were two ways, and even though those ways were ways, there is a better way because of what it does. And what does it do? It gets you the intended product. It gives you the intended purpose. You get to do what you're supposed to do. And so as you read through 11, I want to read starting in verse 11. It says, when Christ appeared as the high priest for the good things that come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not tent made with hands, that is, not of this creation. Verse 12, he entered once for all into the holy place, not by means of blood and goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. Jesus didn't use the sacrifice of other things. He used the sacrifice of himself. I'm going to say it again. Jesus did not use the sacrifice of other things to say, I'm sorry for what I did and missed this standard. He used the sacrifice of himself. And yet he never missed the standard. Jesus gave the sacrifice of himself, not the sacrifice of things. Verse 13, right? Or where are we at? Yeah. For if blood of goats and bulls and sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of flesh. Verse 14, if it did all those things, right, if this way worked for so long and did what it was supposed to do, it says in verse 14, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve a living God. I got more, but I want you to read verses 15 through the end of the chapter. Because in verses 15, 16, and 17, you realize it's a choice that you have. It was a choice that Jesus made. Jesus chose to live this life. He chose to sacrifice himself. He chose other people over him. Same thing that we do. So 7, 8, 9. It's just very clear that Jesus is the sacrifice. It's very clear that Jesus is the price that was paid to make everything better. It's very clear that the point of these 3 chapters is to tell these individuals that Jesus Christ is the best way, because he's way better than the way that you know and the way that you grew up knowing and the way that's worked before, because what Jesus did is fulfill that way to give you a better way. But today, we're talking about the brewing portion. Today, we're brewing. Today, we're allowing God to touch us with this water. And so if the brewing process is where we're at, this is the problem with the brewing process. We don't allow the bloom to take place. We don't allow the gas to leave enough, and so we get stuff trapped. We get anxious. We get impatient. Whatever it is, we get and we do it wrong. And so thinking about brewing, this is where I want to practically end today. If you're a non-believer, right? Look at these empty seats. Now, some of these empty seats are people that should be here that are gone because it's vacation, it's farm, it's all sorts of things. Some of them are sick, but some of them, these sit in these seats, right? They are people that God's working on to bring here. Some of these seats are going to be filled by people in the community. Some of these people in the community are not going to look like you. I'm going to be very clear. If in 12 months I'm standing here on June 1st again and this crowd looks the exact same, we, not me, we have failed the community of Windsor. And this is what I mean. I'm not saying I need more people in these seats. No, we need to look different. We need to make sure people are in here that don't know Jesus. We need to make sure people are in here that do not act the way we act, do not believe the way we believe, because without Jesus, what they got? We want them in here. And listen, if they're in here and they're going to be in here, at some point in time, they're going to have to wrestle with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, right? And if they have to wrestle with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, I think we could all understand that sometimes that's a difficult battle. That's understanding things that you cannot understand. That's allowing the supernatural to speak into your mind when you can give no explanation for what that actually is. So, what do non-believers have to do when Jesus saturates them, starts to touch their lives? One of the things that they have to do, if not the single most important thing they have to do, is they have to let go of faith in themselves and put faith in Jesus Christ. They have to let go of the faith that they put in themselves to now trust someone else, something else they've never seen, they've never talked to, they've never touched, they've never held. Do you not remember how difficult that was and that is? And some of you go, no, I didn't. Thank God for you, but please have patience with the rest of us. That's a difficult thing to grab. That's so hard to let go of who you are, to go, and now I trust in someone completely different. You know why it was hard for the Israelite people to let go of this? Because they had control over this. If I sacrifice X, Y, and Z, I get 1, 2, and 3. So when I screw up, I know what I got to do to be better. This is control. I can do this. This is giving up control. This is going, it's not about you. It doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't matter what you think. It's all about Jesus. That's difficult. That's difficult for people who have lived any sort of their life trusting in themselves and learning that you can take care of you. But that's what they got to do. That's the biggest thing they got to do. Because once they do that, everything else can start to fall into place. It doesn't really fit our demographic here because the majority of you are Christians. The majority of you already know. So the majority of you don't have to let go of this. Or do you? Because I think as believers, I think the largest thing we got to do is the same thing. we got to let go of faith in ourselves and put our trust in Jesus. Well, yeah, I know, but listen, let me make it practical for you. These people that are non-believers, that are wrestling with all of this, that are taking their merry sweet time with making a decision that we should, or that we think should be made like this, when they're doing things in failure, in weakness of Christianity and faith, it's really difficult for us that are stronger to have patience. It's really difficult for us sometimes to go, hey, listen, while the standard was not met, while the standard was not met, the patience and love is here because in truth, as Paul commands, as a stronger Christian, I am not to stand here and go, come on, hurry up. You're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to be here. Stop dragging your freaking feet. Right? As a stronger Christian, I am to go here. I don't know where the video is, but here. I'm to go where they are. And I'm to walk with them. And sometimes, I've learned in my own life, sometimes, Jeremiah, you got to let go of the faith in yourself and put faith in Jesus, because while you don't want to walk backwards because you don't like to backtrack, you don't want to walk backwards because you have spent so much of your time pushing forward. You don't want to walk backwards because they're the ones that have been dragging their feet. They're the ones that have made these decisions. They're the ones, why do I got to pay? Let it go. It's not about you. It's not faith in you. It's faith in God. Maybe you walking back to them will allow them to start walking, and then next thing you know, you're skipping and running, and now you're sprinting, and you're farther than you've ever been before because now you have a partner in crime. Now you got somebody that's dove in with you. My kids are phenomenal by themselves. You start placing them with other people, bad ideas just start to ooze out of them like they're me. You know why? Because I got a partner in crime. It's not just me getting in trouble, you too. And depending on how it went down, I could probably get you in more trouble than myself, but that's just my flesh and that's me. But my challenge to you is the same. Understand that people, if you do not believe in Jesus, you're going to have to let yourself go. You're going to have to let go of the faith in yourself. But understand this, that even if you've spent 3 decades believing in Jesus, you're going to be constantly challenged during your blooming process while you brew to let some things go. And I think the biggest thing, I think the most important thing, and I think the thing that will help you, because it's helped me the most, is when I'm stuck in these moments as a believer, I'm stuck singing this stupid song from Frozen, but the idea, right, is you let it go. You let it go. You are not in control. This is not your timetable. This is not your plan. This is God's. So understand this. The brewing process, no matter if you're an unbeliever or you're a believer, it takes you letting go of the faith in yourself and putting faith in Jesus every single time, in every single circumstance, in every single situation for the duration of the time you have here left on earth. So it doesn't matter if you're just starting out. It doesn't matter if you don't believe. It doesn't matter if you've been here since 1857 when the church was conceived. It doesn't matter. Anytime you're going through your brewing process, understand this. There's a blooming portion of it, and God's asking you specifically to let go of something. Next week, finally, we're here. Next week, the cup of coffee has been made, and we get to finally enjoy it. So, be here next week, or watch next week. Next week, we're going to be in chapter 10. So if you want to read to prepare, chapter 10 is where we're going to be. We're going to be all the way up right to this point to where in our illustration, I want you to come prepared to just sit on your porch, kick your feet up, and enjoy your cup of coffee. Because that's the whole point. That's the whole point. I'm going to have the band come up, and we're going to close in prayer and song. After the song's over with, I encourage you, as always, come and hang out with us in fellowship time, straight across through the double doors here. You'll see the table that I'm running my mouth about always. On the right, keep going through the double doors. There's food, there's drinks, there's fun. Hang out. You hang out long enough to where you hear a bell, that's Sunday school starting time. Do not watch me in that moment because I am tardy always. So you hear the bell. There's an adult Sunday school classroom right here through these two doors. And then there's an adult Sunday school classroom through these doors. They're two different classrooms. I say this, pick one, enjoy it. If you don't, go to the next one next week. If you don't enjoy either one of them, come find me, we'll talk, but whatever. I enjoy them both. But I don't know what you got going on. I just hope that your day will be great. But my challenge is no matter what this day brings, no matter what this week brings, listen to the Lord and allow Him to speak what it is in your life that you need to let go of so that you can put more faith in Him. If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you to stand and we're going to pray. God, thank you for today. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for this church. Thank you for these people. Father, thank you for the fact that we get to stand here and we get to listen to you and know that you're here and speaking to us, and it's all because of your Son, Jesus. And so, Father, I pray that as we leave today, I pray as we do things this week that we won't forget your Son, that we will not forget the sacrifice that He made. And so, God, I pray that when we're met and challenged to let go of whatever it is that you're asking us to let go of, that you'll give us the strength to let it go. That in actual practice and an actual place of our lives, you will show us what being a branch connected to the vine so that fruit can be produced through it looks like. God, I pray that in that we get to see how great and how awesome you are so that, like we're going to talk about next week, we can enjoy the cup of coffee that you've brewed with us. So, Father, I love you. I thank you. It's your Son's name, and all God's people said, amen, amen.